I'm going to talk primarily about the new way that we are going to be doing interviewing, more so in the virtual world. So I will be sharing my screen with all of you because I created just a little bit of a PowerPoint. That way you can follow along with what I am talking about. Can everybody see my screen? Yes? Anybody not able to see the presentation? Awesome. Okay, so I will start by talking a little bit about virtual interviewing. Start. All right, so we're going to first talk a little bit about preparing for the job interview. Now, obviously, working with a virtual interview is a little bit different than working for a face-to-face interview. The preparation can be a little bit different, but some of the things that remain the same. The first thing you want to do to prepare for your job interview is do a little bit of research on the organization. Have 3 to 5 facts prepared about the company. Do some research both on their internet site, their social media sites, and talking to people who you know within the organization. One way that I have found out that that works very well is by going on to LinkedIn and doing a little bit of research. Go to the company page on LinkedIn, find the person who is interviewing you, look at their LinkedIn page, and then you also want to look at what people do you know or have a second degree connection with on LinkedIn to find out if you can talk to them a little bit about what the company offers, what the company is doing to best prepare for that interview. You want to prepare questions for the interview, have them written down ahead of time, and then prepare your stories. Now, the best interview advice that I give to people is have a bucket of 7 stories. And we'll talk a little bit later about how to write those stories. But have this bucket of 7 stories prepared. And then no matter what question you're asked, you'll be able to pull from that bucket of stories. Rehearse those stories several times so they feel like they're second nature. You will really feel like you're able to pull those stories, they feel comfortable, and you're able to talk about them. And then test the technology. So depending on what technology platform that interviewer is using, download it ahead of time. Practice with a friend or use our services. Our employment advisors are able to test your interview technology with you. The more comfortable you get, the more rehearsing that you get with technology, the more comfortable you'll be in the job interview. So then let's talk a little bit about during the job interview. You want to dress one step above what you would wear to work. Even though they can't see you, I still encourage you to get fully dressed as if you were attending a regular job interview. You want to check your lighting and your background. The lighting is really important. I suggest natural lighting. It really is the best way to appear on camera. Make sure that that natural light is behind you. You want to make sure that that everybody can see you, you're not blurry. You want to log in 10 minutes early for the job interview. So by logging in 10 minutes early, you should be able to know whether or not you are ready, everything's working, there's no technology glitches. When you log in, I also encourage you to sit close to your wireless router. Something I've noticed with working in this new virtual world is that occasionally, if you're too far from your wireless router, there'll be glitches in the technology. Another tip is to have all of your other devices in your home turn off the Wi-Fi. So before meeting with students, before doing presentations, I always make sure that I have every cell phone, computer, iPad turned off. So that way only the device that I'm working on is able to be using the Wi-Fi. Make sure to look directly at the camera. It's very tempting to want to know how you look on camera or what you're looking like, But when you're looking at yourself, the person that you're talking to doesn't see that you're looking at yourself. They think you're looking all over the place. So look directly at the green light, the red light, whatever camera light color that you're having. Use good body language. So using good body language is not only making eye contact with your screen, with your camera, but sitting up straight. Sit up with your shoulders back, leaning slightly towards your computer, leaning into the conversation, just as if the person was meeting with you face to face. You want to smile throughout your conversation. And when you're answering, make sure that you're looking into the person's face. Listen to every single question that you're being asked, and it's okay to have a little bit of a pause before answering the question. Make sure that you're not reading a rehearsed answer. One thing that people can really notice on a video call is if you're reading a rehearsed answer. It is okay to have some notes off to the side, have some good answers to your questions jotted down, but don't appear as if you're reading. And watch those vocalized pauses. Vocalized pauses are things like ums, ahs, likes, ah. Those type of vocalized pauses can be very distracting on a video call. Be very brief with your answers and be very clear in your response time. Don't go on and on for a long period of time. Especially with the video technology, people tend to tune out a little bit quicker. We're used to watching videos, we're used to going quickly through conversations, so you want to make sure that you're brief, clear, and concise during all of your answers. And allow for them to ask you questions and follow up. So when you're during the job interview virtually, you want to make sure that you can allow the person to understand your response and also ask those follow-up questions. So what type of questions will be asked during the interview? We'll have some traditional questions. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? When they ask about your strengths and your weaknesses, you really want to have a really good answer prepared. When talking about your strengths during your research, you should have found out what challenges is the company facing right now, and how does the strengths that you have bring those challenges to uniquely solve the problems. In talking about strengths, you want to be specific and relevant to that industry. When talking about weaknesses, it's really important to talk a little bit about things that are a positive weakness. So an example of a positive weakness is maybe you pay a little bit too much close attention to detail, right? So maybe you get yourself in the weeds a little bit. And that's good because it shows that you're showing attention to detail, but sometimes you may get lost. When you're talking about those weaknesses, make sure to talk about how you are working on the weaknesses. Talk about how you're getting better, how you're improving, and talking a little bit about how you'll work on that in the future. Be careful when talking about weaknesses that you don't do anything that would maybe prevent you from getting the job. So for example, if your weakness is sometimes you have a hard time being on time for things, maybe don't talk about that in the job interview and spin that into talking about how sometimes that you work really hard and you put more time and effort into your work. When telling about yourself, that's often a conversation starter. And what employers are looking for is for you to give a little bit of a background of your work history, your education, talking a little bit about what your goals are in your future position. And then walk me through your resume. That's a very common question. Your future employer will have your resume in front of them. They want you to talk about every single job that you have listed, your skills you have listed on your resume, and why you've left each position. If you were fired or you've been let go from a position, it's really important to have a confident answer. When you're talking about reasons for leaving a position, do not put emotion into your reason. When you start putting emotion in, the employer starts caring more about that position. So be brief, Don't go into a lot of reasons why the position didn't work out, and talk about it in a positive way. The most common interview questions are behavioral-based questions. These questions start with, tell me about a time when. Tell me about a time when you worked with a challenging boss. Tell me about a time you worked with somebody you didn't get along well with. Tell me about a time you faced stress or multiple responsibilities at one time. Tell me about a time when you faced a challenge in the workplace. And what they want you to do is tell them a story using the STAR method. So remember earlier when I said to prepare 7 stories, this is where your bucket of stories comes in handy. Always use the STAR method. So when you're writing out your 7 stories, describe the situation that you were in, the task, with the action and the result of your action. You want to make sure when you're using the STAR method that you're being specific. Don't be general. Don't say what you would do or hypothetical. Say, this is what I've done. This is how I fixed the situation. And this is how things turned out. I always tell people when you're creating those 7 stories, make sure they always have a positive ending. Make sure that whatever you've done, it's positive, that you've had an opportunity to really grow, or you showcase how you've bettered the business that you've worked for. Then it doesn't really matter what behavioral-based question you're asked. You can adapt the story depending on the question. Typically in a job interview, you'll be asked about 5 to 10 questions. And when they're asking those questions, they want to know, are you able to think on your feet? Are you able to answer those questions quickly? And sometimes employers will even throw a curveball question in there, such as, if you were an animal, what type of animal would you be and why? You never know the type of curveball question you're going to get, but typically those curveball questions are to see, are you able to adapt and think on your feet? Now, questions for you to ask. You want to make sure to ask questions to show that you're interested in the company that you're going to work for. Now, when you're asking those questions, you do not want to ask about time off, benefits, vacation, pay, any of those questions. You really want to show your interest by talking about what is it that the company has to offer. So I have some example questions. Tell me about your most successful new hire and what made them successful. You want to ask that question because it's turning the behavioral-based script onto the employer. If they're asking you behavioral-based questions, they should have an answer for a behavioral-based question. I really like that question because that can give you a really good indication of what the company culture is like and what they're looking for in a successful team. What do you like about working here? Are there opportunities to grow within the position? Does the company have plans for expansion? Show your interest in the job, the person, and the company. Now, closing the interview, you want to email a thank you note within 24 hours of the interview. You want to make sure to send it over email, especially during a time where most people are working remotely. They will not get a handwritten thank you note. And make sure to end the call promptly. Now, when you're ending the call, make sure that you're looking into the screen, continuing to smile, and ending the call quickly. You don't want to have any fumbling or have any static or any opportunities for noise. So those are the basics of a virtual interview. Now I would love to answer any questions and open this up for questions that you may have regarding job interviews, possibly virtual job interviews. I would say most interviews from what we're hearing from employers are continuing to be virtual for the time being. So now I'd love to open it up for questions. And you can either...
Oh, can you hear me okay, Sarah? This is Noelle.
Hi, Noelle. How are you?
Hello, I am wonderful, and I was really happy to be a part of this presentation. And actually, it came a day or two late for me because I just had a major second interview with a company on Thursday. But that's okay. From what I learned from coming to JSN a few years ago was a huge help for me with my virtual interview. It was interesting. A lot of the things you mentioned today were something I practiced just about thinking about it. I kept thinking, okay, make sure I'm looking into the camera and things like that. But one of my questions for you was, I made kind of a major error, and I thought that with the emails sent to me from the recruiting company, that the manager that I interviewed with on Thursday, had her email within it, and that's what one of the recruiters had told me. I was getting busy to leave for the holiday weekend, and all of a sudden on Friday at 6 p.m., I realized I had not sent my thank you email to the manager. So I scrambled looking through emails, and I found the one the recruiter had sent me that had the video link, which he in turn had said her email address or information should have been on there. It wasn't. Because he had to forward it to me because it got lost in my Gmail 2 days prior to the interview. Yeah. So I scrambled. I jumped on LinkedIn. I found her on LinkedIn, and I went ahead and sent her a thank you via LinkedIn in the message area, and said that I apologized for having to send it through LinkedIn because I had thought that I had her email address, but I did not. So I'm wondering if that is appropriate.
Yes. That's a great question, Noelle. And that brings up a good conversation about connecting with your interviewer on LinkedIn. Now, I would ask, did you connect with her or just send her the email, the message?
I thought about it and I wasn't sure what to do. And so in a panic, I just sent the message to make sure that I would get the thank you to her.
Perfect. So I think that would be okay if you don't have the interviewer's email to send them a message on LinkedIn. I would not send them a connection request until you work for the organization.
Oh, thank God.
Yes. Because think about that. If they connect with every person that they interview and it doesn't work out, they don't really, LinkedIn should be your professional network. So I think what you did was definitely appropriate. And it's better to show that you've demonstrated that initiative to still show her you appreciate her time, her effort, instead of hurrying up and not sending anything at all. So I think that was definitely appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I feel a whole lot better about that.
That's good. That's great. And I'm glad you had an interview. That's awesome. Good questions. What other questions do we have?
Hey, Sarah, it's Greg.
Hi.
Are there any, what would you say about light positions? Are there any specific light positions that work better for virtual interviews?
Light positions?
It's like positions for your lighting. Should the lighting be in front of you, behind you, off the side?
That's a really great question. So one thing that I would recommend is that you have the light behind. So if you were on a laptop, right, you have the light behind the computer, not shining behind your head, but in front of your face, behind the computer. So right now, my natural lighting and my lighting is in front. I'm facing the light. You want to make sure that you're facing the light whenever you are doing a virtual interview. If you have it behind you, it will wash you out too much. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions. Another thing that I would recommend is checking your audio settings. I think I mentioned that, but I'm not sure if I did or not. Make sure that your audio, when you're on a virtual call, that there's no echoing, that there's no opportunities for any type of background noise. Sometimes, depending on your computer, a headset may work better. Sometimes it might not. So I know I have a MacBook, and there is no plug-in for a headset. So it would be wireless that I would have to have. And sometimes Bluetooth wireless doesn't pick up as well as the computer microphone does. Good. Other questions on interviews? And if you're not comfortable talking, you can also put them in the chat. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Does anybody have any general comments, questions?
Well, I do. This is Dennis, and I've never had a virtual interview, and I'm just wondering how appropriate it is to ask who can call and what their positions are.
Oh, absolutely. And usually people that are on the call, Dennis, they will introduce themselves, right? So they will say, hi, I'm Sarah Rivet, and I am an employment instructor in Employment Connections. So usually they will do that. And one thing I would recommend is jot down on a piece of paper as people are introducing themselves, jot down their name and what their position is, or just jot down at least their name so you always remember who is on the call and what they're doing on the call.
Okay, and how about recording the interview? I don't know, based on if it's through Teams or whatever, if they can see that you're recording it, or if you should record on the side, or what are your thoughts on that?
That is a really great question. So make sure that, on our recordings, they say by joining, you're giving consent for the meeting to be recorded. Some people may not be comfortable with that. And for privacy, a lot of organizations will not be comfortable with you recording the interview because if they're talking about things, possibly they don't want their questions being put out there. I know some companies are very private on the questions that they're asking candidates. So I would not suggest recording, and I probably wouldn't even ask to record the interview for privacy reasons.
Okay, thank you.
And one thing that I would suggest, Dennis, is the nice thing, if you want to practice to see how you look on a recorded interview, Employment Connections can do that for you. So we could have you do a practice run with one of our employment advisors. We can record that practice interview, and then you could watch it on your own time, and then you'd be more comfortable with seeing exactly how you're being perceived by the employer. That might be a good option for recording.
Sounds good.
Sarah, this is Noelle. I have just a short comment to what we were just talking about with seeing yourself.
Yeah.
So when you had mentioned getting on the call 10 minutes prior, what I found with the second interview, because this was actually my second interview, the virtual interview, the first virtual interview was still with the same organization, but it was the contract company. So what I did was I made sure I was on 10 minutes ahead of time because I knew no one else more than likely was not going to be on. And that was when I had the opportunity to see how I looked, to test my lighting. The only thing I couldn't test was my volume, but I had to change several things within that 10 minutes for the first interview with the contract company. And then that helped prepare me for the second interview with the actual manager of the company herself.
Yeah, that's great advice, Noelle. Thank you for sharing that. And I think the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll be on a virtual interview. Every company is going to have their own software. One thing that I've noticed a few companies doing is doing a screening prior to the actual interview with the person. So what a screening would be is they would send you a link. On the screen, you click on the link. On the screen, a question would come up. They give you 2 minutes to think about your answer, and then it automatically starts recording you, and then it sends the recording to the company. And that's a screening tool in place of a phone screen. A lot of companies have been using that for years prior, but now they're starting to use it even more. So that's a little bit different than actually interacting and somebody being on the call with you. So, you never know what technology each company is going to use. Other questions? Well,
Yeah, you mentioned, Dennis again, you mentioned about good questions to ask and what to stay away from. Kind of, it sounds like stay away on the first interviews anyways, the what's in it for me, I want money, 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 etc.
yeah.
But how do you know, um, like when you get to salary, um, just in some of the positions that I've seen, they don't have a salary range at all, so you don't know that you're even in the same ballpark.
Mhm.
How do you kind of screen the job when you're, already at that level, or do you just play with it and wait till it gets more serious and then find out and say, well, uh, we're too far apart here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one thing I've noticed in the last year is that employers are becoming more forthcoming with their salary than they ever have been in the past, right? So, employers are really trying to put a range out there because they don't want to waste anybody's time. A couple things I would do to find out if you're in the ballpark, check glassdoor.com. Typically on Glassdoor, depending on the size of the company and the people who have put out there their salary, you can get an idea of, depending on the position, what the salary is for that organization specifically. So go on to Glassdoor, go on to salary.com, and try to do a little bit of research on what the salary is for the position. Now, after that first interview, that's when they start talking about salary. So you want to have your range in mind. Now, I always tell people I could want $1 million a year salary because I think I'm very talented and worth that much. However, my industry is not going to fall into that, what I think I want and what I need, right? So you want to make sure that you're within the industry standards, and not keeping in mind that, when you work for a company, you may have a higher salary after 20 or 30 years of working at that company. But then once you start over someplace else, the salary range definitely changes. So know what the industry standards are, know what you can expect based on your education, skills, and abilities, and be prepared with a range to discuss with the employers. I think there's very tactful ways to discuss salary, and I always recommend people talk about salary over email in writing, because that way there's no surprises, right? I have known a lot of job seekers over the years where they come up with a salary, they talk about it and agree upon it, and then they get to the first paycheck and the salary is not what they agreed on. And that happens because it wasn't in writing. So always do offers and salary negotiations over email. So I hope that answers your question, Dennis.
Yeah, yeah. And I might be changing industries. So coming from the paper industry and maybe in the plastic industry, or uh, who knows what I end up. Um, my 30 years of experience might not be seen as valuable in a different industry.
Well, I think
So,
all experience is valuable, right? So, I think they'll see that as a value, and you just really need to sell yourself on the skills and strengths and the transferable skills. What if you're switching from paper to plastic, right? What are the transferables? What things are the same? And what challenges is this new industry facing that you can uniquely solve?
thank you.
Yes.
Sarah, this is Noelle. I have one quick follow-up to the salary question that Dennis presented. So just maybe something to remember as well, because I was caught off guard myself. So for this particular company, I was recruited through LinkedIn, and the recruiter actually asked me on the spot what I would be expecting for salary. And the reason I wasn't prepared was because when the recruiter contacted me, I got a very quick overview of what the job was to be about. And when I actually interviewed with the contract company, I found out a lot more, and then again with the manager. So I was not prepared. However, I lucked out, and I decided to throw out a figure that was about 10,000 more than what I'm currently making, because I have a prior certification, and I actually lucked out. When I did look it up online, it looked like a median range salary, but then it was interesting that the contract the contract company manager told me that that was a great amount to start at, because he said it was actually more on the low end, but it gave me room to negotiate. And once the contract ends, and I would transition over to the company. So my advice would be, make sure you look it up to at least know the median range of the salary, the low end and the median range, because again, I was caught off guard, and it happens to be the same industry as what I was working in prior. So like I said, I randomly threw something out, and it happened to work in my favor, but I'm sure that wouldn't happen again. So I know now for future reference to make sure I at least know the low and the median range of the salary, because it sounds like recruiters are going to ask that question.
Yes, absolutely, Noelle. If you're working with a recruiting firm, they oftentimes will ask that, because they're not going to pass you on to the hiring manager if they don't know if you'd even consider the job. That's really the recruiter's job, is to screen you and make sure they know all the details before passing you on for the actual interview with the company. So that's a really great point to bring up. And always remember, with salary, go in the middle of the range. Don't ever go on the low end, because when you go on the low end of a range, it's a lot harder to get to the middle and then get to the top will take several years, versus if you start in the middle, then you're getting to the top of the salary scale a little bit sooner.
Yes, I found that was interesting when I had, like I said, I looked in the Appleton area at the median range, and then was like, whew, I ended up giving him the median range. But then it was interesting that the actual contract company said that he considered that to be the low end. But however, he was coming from Chicago. So I'm just wondering if he was thinking in terms of like the Chicago area versus Appleton area. It was just really interesting that he told me that was the low end when I had looked it up, and it was actually a median range.
Mm-hmm.
That was very interesting.
Which is great for, working when you think about virtual job search. And I know this is a little off the interviewing topic, but when you're thinking about virtual job search and working virtually or remotely from a company that is based in other places, chances are your salary range will be higher because of the cost of living in some of those bigger cities. I've known a lot of job seekers to take remote positions, and they're getting paid significantly better because the company is based in the East Coast or the West Coast, and they get paid a little bit higher. So yeah, that's a good point to bring up. Thank you. Other questions on interviews?
Yeah, it might be off topic a little bit, but it was mentioned about recruiters and contract firms, and I'm wondering, who do the recruiters work for? They work for the company, right? Because I think I'd have a tendency to go to a recruiter and have them try and coach me, but they're really screening and get paid by the hiring company. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. They get paid. Recruiters get paid by the company that's hiring a candidate.
Okay, and is it getting more and more common for companies to hire somebody through a contract firm, like in a technical area, and then decide later to hire on?
I,
Is that
I
being more of a trend or not?
we hadn't seen that trend prior to right before we left, when things were more face to face. I didn't see that trend. Um, I was seeing that companies are preferring to do the hiring a lot more themselves. But I really think it depends on the organization. Every company is a little bit different in how they structure, how many recruiters they have paid on staff versus how many of them just don't have the ability to employ recruiters. Now, one trend that I did notice with a lot of companies is there was a lot of companies hiring recruiters to work for their organization because it was cheaper to have a recruiter work for their organization than it was for them to hire a firm to represent them. It does cost a company quite a bit of money to have a recruiting firm work for them. So every company is just a little bit different with that.
And as far as calling the company, should you or do you need to wait for them to call you? And I'm not sure if, for example, something was sent in through Indeed, or if you know somebody at the company and they say, oh, why don't you send an email directly to their head of HR and maybe CC them on the email. When is it appropriate to make a phone call?
That's a good question, Dennis. So I always recommend, as long as they don't put on a job ad or their company says do not contact them, I always recommend that you contact them within 1 week. So within 1 week of submitting an application or a resume, it's really important that you follow up with a phone call or an email. Um, I don't, sorry, someone else has, here, I gotta see if I can stop sharing my screen. One thing that I would definitely recommend is that you contact them within 1 week. So in 1 week, contact the employer and let them know that you are interested, that you've submitted your resume, and that you're just following up to find out the status of the position. If anything else, it will pull your resume to the top of the page. It will also allow your resume to be noticed versus just sent into a black hole. You want to show that you're demonstrating that initiative.
Okay, and I sent a resume and cover letter through Indeed, and then I found out from somebody who looked at the resume, and it's not the modern style. It was probably a good letter and resume for when I graduated college, but right now it's really, I guess, to be written so that a computer can read it, and it has all these matrix and specifics. Is it appropriate to send an updated resume and letter once I get it all cleaned up?
I would not resend it. I would definitely, before you send it out to anybody, I would have somebody look it over. We are offering virtual resume reviews where you can meet one-on-one with myself, with Greg, with one of our employment advisors. And I wouldn't resend it because then they'd say, well, why didn't you send me the final version right away? Right. So once you submit it, think of that as kind of a final submission, unless you have a new job to add or a new company that you're working for. One thing that I would really recommend is before you send it out any further, have somebody take a peek.
I definitely will.
Other questions? and job search in general questions?
Sure. And I'm getting started. This is really my day one.
That's
And
okay.
I saw that one of the topics was LinkedIn. So I've joined LinkedIn. I know I have to update my photo on there. And from what you said, dress for the interview, like one level above what I think I would be dressing for work. So I would probably do that. No three-piece suit for me on this one. But um, I'm hesitant to really update it until I have all my act together, like a resume, because if I get any responses back, then I don't want to have that pause. Is that a good approach, or can I do like steps? I did show an end date for my past employer, so it's kind of like the clock is ticking. But
Yeah.
at what point do I update the LinkedIn, or can I do that in steps and just as I go along?
So I would really get your LinkedIn updated right away. The first thing that an employer is going to do is they're going to look at your LinkedIn page. So one thing that the first step is to look you up on social media once they get your resume. So you want to make sure that you have a good social media presence. I tell people LinkedIn, don't put too much thought into it, right? Don't say, oh, it has to be perfect before I do it. Start updating it. Once you have an updated resume, copy and paste right from your resume right into your LinkedIn profile. The picture is the most important part of LinkedIn, along with your work history. You want to have your skills. I'd say you probably need to spend a good hour updating your LinkedIn page. That should be one of your first steps when you're on a job search. So updating LinkedIn, updating your resume would probably take about 3 hours of time total. And once you have that done, then you'd be good to start getting out there and sending out your resume and sending connection requests. Always remember that LinkedIn is not a billboard. So I tell people, know that LinkedIn is really your opportunity to network with people. You're putting your stuff out there. Yes, that's important. But what's more important is that you're using LinkedIn, connecting, conversating, sharing, liking, reading, researching. That's really what LinkedIn is used for in a job search. We do have a video on our JSN page talking a little bit about LinkedIn, giving a good step-by-step on how to build your LinkedIn profile. And that is on our YouTube channel, I believe. So I would definitely encourage you to watch that video. It's a good learning lesson on how to utilize LinkedIn.
Okay, thank you for the advice. I will definitely check that out.
Yes. All right. Other questions? These are great. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Every Monday, JSN is meeting at 10 a.m. Next week, we will be with Heartland. We're trying to bring in some employers so you have a direct connection to talk to employers about your job search questions. Great opportunity to network with local employers. So thank you so much for being here. And as a reminder, if you need specific help, resume review, practice interviewing, or you need some help with your job search, we are meeting virtually and we're open to the public with everybody, and you're able to ask us any questions. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sarah. This is great.
Yeah,
Thank you, Sarah.
Have a good afternoon.
you as well.